So today I'm actually answering a question that a lot of people have asked me, and also maybe something that you actually wonder as well. Does red meat actually increase your cancer risk? What is red meat in the first place? What types of cancers is it correlated with? Why does it actually increase your risk versus other types of proteins? Before we get started, my name is Dr. Becky. I'm a naturopathic doctor, cancer coach, and cancer survivor. I work with cancer survivors both during and post treatment and really focus on empowered action that we can take for our health. Just a reminder, if you haven't yet, to download the free Cancer Thrivers Food Guide. I'll add it in the descriptor, or you can find it in the link section as well. So let's get started. First of all, what is red meat? So red meat is anything that's beef, lamb, veal, mutton, goat, as well as pork. And I know pork is something that's really surprising to a lot of people because when you cook it, it actually turns white. It is actually considered a red meat. So what we do know about red meats like this is that the International Agency for Research on Cancer has actually classified all red meats as a group 2A carcinogen or probably carcinogenic or cancer causing to humans. As a group 2 carcinogen, red meats is in the same class as something like infection with an HPV virus, which we know can cause cervical cancers, night shift work, which has been related to different cancers like breast cancer, petroleum refining exposure, DDT, and so much more. How high is the risk though? The risk of colorectal cancer could increase by as much as 17% for every 100 grams of red meat eaten daily. How much is that? That would be a 3.5 ounce amount of red meat, or roughly the size of a deck of cards. Now, I didn't have a deck of cards, so this is what I was able to find in my kids' drawer, but this is about the size of a deck of cards and a size of that 100 grams of meat. That could potentially increase your risk for colorectal cancer as much as 17% if we have this amount daily. But red meat is also linked to higher risk of multiple different types of cancer. So not only colorectal cancer, but things like breast, endometrial, lung, liver, esophageal, stomach, kidney, pancreatic, and prostate cancer as well. We also see conversely that there are lower rates of cancers in populations where they either have very low consumption of red meats or even no consumption of red meats. So there is some form of activity or action by those red meats that can potentially increase different cancer risks. Now, what is it about red meat specifically compared to other types of meats or proteins that are actually related to this increase in cancer risk? There are a lot of studies that show as to what some of those reasons might be. We obviously still need a ton of research, but we're going to discuss 5 of those possible mechanisms today. First one is actually the heme iron content of red meat. So red meat has a ton of heme iron compared to even other types of meats like chicken and fish and turkey, for example. Now, what we do know about heme iron is that it can be broken down in the gut and it forms these chemicals that have been linked to damaging the cells in the lining, which could lead to something like colorectal cancer. In other types of cancers, though, we do see that heme iron has been seen to promote inflammation, oxidative stress, DNA damage, for example, and tumor progression or formation. Secondarily, red meat actually has an animal sugar molecule called N-glycolyl-neuraminic acid. These are actually found highly more so in red meats and other types of meats. They can promote inflammation again, oxidative stress, and tumor formation. Anytime we have inflammation and oxidative stress, that immediately actually increases the risk for many cancerous type processes, and so that's why we want to try and decrease those as much as possible. Third underlying reason might be that there are added hormones to red meat specifically. In some countries, what happens is that they actually use external hormones as hormonal growth promoters in things like beef cattle, for example. These hormones that are given to the animals are actually used to help increase how fast the animals grow, but it also actually helps their body use the food that they're given more effectively to actually create more lean meat. What we do know is that they are approved for use in Canada and the United States. In Canada specifically, if you look at the government website, we actually are allowed to use 6 different types of hormones as hormonal growth promoters only in beef cattle. And those hormones include things like progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, and 3 synthetic different types. The research around how much hormones being given to our livestock can actually impact our health are still sort of inconclusive. But if there is a concern for hormones specifically in your type of cancer, this is when it can become more concerning as well. What we know is that organic beef in general in Canada cannot have hormones to promote growth being given to them. And so this is one of the reasons that if you are concerned and if you're able to, getting something like organic grass-fed meat is actually really important. Number 4, there are high levels of saturated fat found in red meat versus other types of leaner meats like chicken, turkey, or fish. Saturated fats are fats that are actually solid in room temperature, but they can actually lead to many different issues with your health. So things like weight gain, increase cholesterol, promote inflammation, cause more oxidative stress. Saturated fats have been linked to increasing risk for multiple different types of cancers on their own, things like prostate cancer, breast, colorectal cancer, and others as well. This type of fat, though, is also concerning because it can actually also increase the risk of things like heart disease and stroke. As a cancer survivor, this is really important for you because you might have a higher risk of getting heart disease, and so decreasing your saturated fat is always a good thing. Number 5, the way that you cook your meat could also increase your risk for cancer as well. Cooking at high temperatures especially has been found to create potent mutagens called heterocyclic amines or HCAs and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs. These mutagens can actually alter the DNA and also then increase risk for cancer. Here are a few tips that might be helpful. First of all, try to decrease or minimize your red meat consumption as much as possible. There are some studies that sort of give us a cap of about 4 to 6 servings at the most per week if we're able to, but I would argue that maybe minimizing this even more may be important, especially for people with different concerns, like things like high cholesterol, for example. The other thing is to really try and focus more on things like chicken, turkey, fish. I also love using ground turkey instead of ground beef, for example, and I find it works really well. Focus on plant sources of protein, so tofu, lentils, beans, nuts, and seeds are also really great options that we do know have a lot of anti-inflammatory impacts as well. When you do choose red meats, try and choose leaner cuts. Things like pork tenderloin or beef flank, for example, tend to have less amounts of fat in them. And if there are more fat sort of surrounding the meat as well, try and trim the fat before you actually cook it too, to help minimize some of those saturated fats as well. And again, where you're able to, try and get organic grass-fed beef, which hasn't been given the hormone growth promoters, especially if you're concerned about hormones and the impact to your health as well. Please make sure to save, like, and share this video with anyone that might find it helpful, and to click the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.